When people looked at Naomi and Daniel, they saw the kind of marriage everyone admired. Daniel was a respected businessman whose company had grown from a tiny office into one of the fastest-rising firms in the city. Naomi stood quietly beside him at every milestone, smiling during celebrations and praying through every setback. Few people knew that long before the expensive suits, luxury cars, and elegant house, there had been years when they could barely afford rent. Naomi had sold the little jewelry her late mother left her so Daniel could invest in his first business. She worked long hours, skipped meals, and stayed awake at night helping him organize paperwork because they could not afford employees. Whenever Daniel felt discouraged, she reminded him that success belonged to those who refused to quit. She believed in his dreams even more than he believed in himself. As the years passed, Daniel finally achieved everything he had ever wanted. His business expanded, influential people sought his company, and invitations to exclusive events became part of his new lifestyle. The humble man who once thanked God for every small blessing slowly disappeared. Success changed the way he dressed, the people he admired, and eventually the way he looked at the woman who had stood beside him through every struggle. Naomi noticed the change long before anyone else. His conversations became shorter, his smiles became rare. He spent more nights away from home, always blaming meetings, conferences, or urgent business dinners. She wanted to believe him because trust had always been the foundation of their marriage. Still, deep inside her heart, an uneasy feeling refused to disappear. Around that time, Daniel met Vanessa, a young woman who loved attention as much as she loved expensive things. She knew exactly how to flatter powerful men, and Daniel quickly became fascinated by her confidence and glamorous appearance. She praised his success, admired his wealth, and constantly reminded him that he deserved a woman who matched his new status. Every compliment inflated his pride a little more. Slowly, he began comparing Vanessa's fashionable lifestyle to Naomi's quiet simplicity. He forgot that the woman he now considered ordinary had once carried him through extraordinary hardships. Before long, rumors began spreading among Daniel's friends and business associates. Some noticed Vanessa attending events that Naomi had once attended. Others saw Daniel treating Vanessa with affection he no longer showed his own wife. A few people tried to warn him, but Daniel dismissed every concern. He convinced himself that he had simply outgrown his marriage. In his mind, Naomi belonged to the difficult years he wanted to leave behind forever. At home, Naomi continued doing everything she had always done. She prepared meals that often went untouched. She prayed every night for her husband, asking God to restore the love that seemed to be slipping away. She never searched through his phone or followed him because she believed that forcing someone to stay was not love. Instead, she hoped kindness would remind him of the vows they had once made before God. One evening, Daniel arrived home earlier than usual, but there was nothing comforting about the expression on his face. He walked into the living room with Vanessa standing confidently beside him. Naomi immediately sensed that something terrible was about to happen. Daniel didn't ask her to sit down. He didn't thank her for the years they had shared. Without the slightest trace of compassion, he placed divorce papers on the table between them. "I've made my decision," he said coldly. "This marriage has been over for a long time." Naomi looked at him silently, waiting for him to explain, hoping there was still some misunderstanding. Instead, Daniel laughed softly and continued, "You're a good woman, Naomi, but you're no longer the woman I want. I've worked too hard to stay tied to a life that no longer fits me." Vanessa folded her arms and smiled without saying a word. The satisfaction on her face hurt even more than Daniel's cruel words. Daniel continued speaking as though discussing a business contract instead of ending a marriage. He told Naomi that Vanessa understood his ambitions, his lifestyle, and the future he wanted. He claimed he had settled for Naomi years ago because he had been poor and desperate, but now he deserved someone better. Every sentence pierced Naomi's heart, yet she refused to argue. She realized that no amount of pleading could change someone whose heart had already chosen pride over loyalty. Quietly, she picked up the divorce papers. Tears filled her eyes, but her hands never trembled. She signed every page without speaking. Daniel seemed almost disappointed that she offered no resistance. "I expected more of a fight," he said. Naomi finally looked at him and spoke with remarkable calmness. "Love is not proven by forcing someone to stay. If leaving makes you happy, then go in peace. But remember this, Daniel, wealth can replace comfort. It can replace houses and cars, it can even replace people in your life, but it can never replace peace." Her words meant nothing to him. Within days, Naomi packed her belongings into one small suitcase. She left behind the luxurious house she had helped build. She refused the expensive jewelry Daniel offered as part of the settlement. She even declined additional money from his lawyers. She only took a few clothes, a worn Bible, family photographs, and the wedding ring she quietly placed inside a small wooden box instead of throwing it away. She walked out of the house with dignity while neighbors watched from a distance, whispering about how unfortunate her life had become. Many believed Naomi's story had ended that day. Daniel certainly believed so. Only weeks later, he married Vanessa in one of the most extravagant weddings the city had seen. Social media overflowed with photographs of designer outfits, luxury decorations, expensive cars, and smiling guests. People congratulated the newlyweds and admired what appeared to be the perfect couple. Daniel proudly declared that he had finally found true happiness. Far away from the attention and celebration, Naomi rented a tiny apartment in a quiet neighborhood. The furniture was old, the rooms were small, and the future seemed uncertain. Some nights she cried herself to sleep, asking God questions no one else could answer. She wondered why years of sacrifice had ended in betrayal. Yet every morning she wiped away her tears, opened her Bible, and reminded herself that bitterness would only destroy the little peace she still possessed. Instead of praying for revenge, she prayed for strength to rebuild her life one day at a time. She accepted a modest administrative job at a local charity organization. The salary was small, but the work filled her heart with purpose. She helped struggling families, encouraged widows who had lost hope, and listened to people carrying burdens even heavier than her own. Without realizing it, every act of kindness slowly healed the wounds betrayal had left behind. Meanwhile, Daniel and Vanessa enjoyed a life that seemed flawless on the surface. Expensive vacations, luxury shopping, and glamorous parties convinced everyone they had made the right choice. Daniel often looked at pictures of his new life with satisfaction, believing he had escaped the ordinary existence Naomi represented. But life has a way of exposing foundations built on selfishness. Only 3 months after the wedding, Daniel prepared to finalize the biggest business agreement of his career. It was a deal that promised to double his company's value overnight. Investors were ready, contracts had been drafted, and success appeared guaranteed. Then, without warning, everything began to change. Only 3 months after the wedding, Daniel prepared to finalize the biggest business agreement of his career. It was a deal that promised to double his company's value overnight. Investors were ready, contracts had been drafted, and success appeared guaranteed. Then, without warning, everything began to change. The foreign company leading the investment suddenly withdrew after discovering financial inconsistencies created by one of Daniel's senior managers. The announcement spread quickly through the business community. Within days, other investors became nervous and started pulling out as well. Projects that once seemed certain were suddenly frozen. Contracts worth millions disappeared almost overnight. Daniel kept telling everyone it was only temporary, but deep inside, fear had already taken hold. As the pressure grew, the confident businessman who once believed nothing could stop him began making desperate decisions. He borrowed heavily, convinced that one more successful deal would save everything. Instead, each gamble pushed him deeper into debt. Suppliers demanded payment, banks began calling every day, and trusted partners quietly distanced themselves from him. The same people who once competed for a seat at his table suddenly acted as though they barely knew his name. Invitations stopped coming. The phone that never stopped ringing became painfully silent. Vanessa found the new reality difficult to accept. She had married a man surrounded by luxury, not one drowning in financial problems. At first, she encouraged him with empty promises, but her patience disappeared as quickly as the money. The expensive shopping trips became arguments. The vacations were canceled. The luxury cars were sold to pay debts. Every sacrifice felt like a personal insult to her. Instead of standing beside Daniel during the hardest season of his life, she constantly reminded him of everything they had lost. "You promised me a beautiful life," she complained one evening. "This isn't what I married." Daniel tried to explain that businesses sometimes failed and recovered, but Vanessa no longer wanted explanations. She wanted comfort, status, and admiration. Without those things, her affection slowly vanished. Meanwhile, Naomi's life continued moving in a completely different direction. She never heard about Daniel's troubles through gossip because she refused to ask about him. She focused on her work, helping people who had experienced loss, betrayal, and disappointment. Her kindness earned the respect of everyone around her. The director of the charity noticed her honesty and dedication and offered her a leadership position overseeing several community programs. The promotion came with a better salary and greater responsibility. For the first time in many years, Naomi felt that her value was being recognized not because of someone else's success, but because of her own character. One afternoon, a successful entrepreneur visited the charity to discuss funding new educational projects. As he listened to Naomi speak about serving struggling families, he was deeply impressed by her wisdom and compassion. Instead of speaking about profits, she spoke about people. Instead of asking what she could gain, she asked how many lives could be changed. The entrepreneur later invited her to help manage one of his nonprofit foundations. It was an opportunity she had never imagined. She accepted with gratitude, determined to continue living with integrity. Months passed, and Naomi's peaceful life became a quiet testimony that healing was possible. She was no longer defined by the divorce that had once shattered her heart. She smiled more often. She laughed without forcing herself. The pain had not completely disappeared, but it no longer controlled her future. Daniel's situation, however, continued to worsen. Lawsuits began arriving one after another. Former business partners accused him of breaching agreements. Creditors demanded immediate repayment. The stress became unbearable. Sleepless nights turned into constant exhaustion. His doctor warned him that his blood pressure was dangerously high and advised him to reduce stress before it caused permanent damage. But Daniel could not find peace. Every morning brought another problem waiting outside his door. One evening, he returned home hoping to find comfort, only to discover that Vanessa had packed several expensive suitcases. She calmly informed him that she was leaving. "You can't be serious," Daniel whispered. "I didn't sign up to struggle," she replied without emotion. "You were exciting when you had everything. Now all you have are problems." Daniel stood silently as she walked away. The same woman he had believed was his future did not even look back before closing the door behind her. In that painfully quiet moment, he remembered another woman walking out of his house months earlier carrying only one small suitcase. The difference was impossible to ignore. Naomi had left with tears but without hatred. Vanessa left without tears because she had never truly loved him. For the first time since the divorce, Daniel allowed himself to remember everything Naomi had done for him. He remembered the nights she stayed awake helping him prepare business proposals. He remembered how she sold her jewelry so he could chase his dreams. He remembered every prayer she whispered when he wanted to give up. Most of all, he remembered her final words. "Wealth can replace many things, but it can never replace peace." Now he finally understood what she meant. Several months later, Daniel attended a community fundraising event hoping to reconnect with people who might help rebuild his reputation. As he entered the hall, his eyes froze on a familiar face across the room. Naomi stood confidently at the front, welcoming guests with a warm smile. She looked peaceful, elegant, and genuinely happy. There was no bitterness in her eyes, no anger, no desire to prove anything. She carried herself with a quiet confidence that success alone could never buy. For a moment, Daniel could hardly believe what he was seeing. The woman he thought would spend her life broken had become stronger than ever. After the event ended, he slowly walked toward her. "Naomi," he said softly. She turned and smiled politely. "Daniel, it's been a long time." There was no hostility in her voice, only calmness. He struggled to find the right words. "I've made so many mistakes," he admitted. "I thought success made me important. I forgot who stood beside me before any of it existed. I hurt the one person who truly loved me." Naomi listened quietly without interrupting. Daniel lowered his head. I don't expect you to forget what I did. I don't even deserve your forgiveness, but if there's any place left in your heart for mercy, I'm asking for it. Naomi remained silent for several seconds before speaking. I forgave you a long time ago. Daniel looked up, surprised. Holding on to hatred would have kept me trapped in the worst chapter of my life, she continued. Forgiveness didn't excuse your choices, it simply allowed me to move forward. A small tear rolled down Daniel's face. Can we start over? He asked. Naomi smiled gently. No, the answer was calm, not cruel. You are part of my past, Daniel. God healed wounds I thought would never heal. Going back would only reopen them. I sincerely hope you rebuild your life, but my future is no longer waiting behind me. Daniel nodded slowly. Deep inside, he knew she was right. As Naomi walked away, he realized the greatest loss of his life had never been his company, his wealth, or his reputation. It was the faithful woman he had failed to appreciate while she stood beside him. Years later, people no longer spoke about Daniel's luxurious wedding or the fortune he once possessed. They spoke about Naomi, the woman who lost everything the world considered valuable yet gained something far greater: peace, purpose, dignity, and a future no betrayal could steal. Her story became a reminder that character is worth more than riches and that true strength is revealed not when life is easy, but when the heart chooses grace instead of revenge. Daniel eventually rebuilt a modest life, but he carried one lesson with him forever. Success without gratitude becomes pride. Pride destroys wisdom. And when someone carelessly throws away the people who loved them during their hardest days, they often discover too late that some blessings never return once they are lost. Naomi never celebrated Daniel's downfall because her greatest victory was never watching him lose everything. Her greatest victory was refusing to lose herself. In the end, the woman who walked away with nothing became the one who truly had everything that mattered, proving that sometimes God's greatest blessings begin the moment we find the courage to walk away from what was never meant to break us forever.